I'm probably going to regret this spot. Right in the sunlight, even though I have sunscreen on, I might still turn into a lobster. Ah, that's better. That's right, you go hide behind the clouds, you flaming ball of skin cancer. Anyway, so I decided to comment on this after all, after having seen all the ranting and raving and review bombing and this and that and the other. I figured it might be good to talk about the positives as well. First off, hey, nothing's perfect in Revelations. Definitely not perfect. There are things to criticize. There are odd choices. But overall, I've enjoyed it, watching it. And this is, talking to someone who was a total Masters of the Universe fan as a kid. I was obsessed with that, basically, between the age of, 6 and 8, 10, something like that. And approaching this, I was actually hoping that they wouldn't make it too much like the cheesy cringe fest that was the original. At the time, the 80s were pretty cheesy overall, but I actually tried to rewatch it, for comparison. I made it through one episode with a lot of cringing, and oh boy, it hasn't aged well. I mean, there are still some things to like about it, namely Skeletor. This is not as predictably formulaic as the original was. By the way, spoilers, I'm going to put them in timestamps down below so you can look at the timeline and skip them. I'll try to avoid them as much as possible. In the original, it was just, each episode was just Skeletor comes up with a new devious plan, tries to lure He-Man into a trap or otherwise, gain an advantage over him, and He-Man has to save the day. And of course, we do have to keep in mind that it was a kids show. So there are going to be some limitations with what they can do, how deep they can go, how complex the story can be, and the characters. They weren't complex at all in the original. And this has been changed in reboots, which I quite like. Now, I agree that there isn't enough He-Man in Revelation. You can say it doesn't actually have He-Man in the title, it's just Masters of the Universe, which is fair enough. But I do think for a character who used to be so prominent, he should have had more screen time. Granted, he saves the world once again. He does get to be his usual heroic self, but he's not as one-dimensional as he was in the original. In the original, what was He-Man? Big, powerful, goody two-shoes. That was the extent of his character. Oh, and horribly lame dad joke puns.
That'll teach him to put the squeeze on us.
He's always been, to me, the least interesting character, personality-wise, in the entire thing. Okay, that I should clarify, otherwise it seems pretty contradictory to first say there isn't enough He-Man and then say He-Man was the least interesting character. My expectation was that He-Man would feature about as much as usual, but that they would make him more interesting and expand on his character, give him more personality, make him less cringy and cheesy, etc. As a kid, I actually preferred Man-at-Arms, who, by the way, is badass in Revelation. And Skeletor is just, he was the highlight.
I could write a book about what you don't know.
Being witty and abusing his henchmen verbally and sometimes physically too, that was a fun part. So yeah, he's still a goody two-shoes. Like, he still isn't like super deep by any means, but there's a little bit more to him, I would say. There's a little bit more charisma. There's a little bit less awkwardness, because he used to be kind of a dork. And as He-Man, I mean. The other thing is, I actually like that he now transforms. Like, he literally transforms. Because in the original, let's not forget, it was essentially a glorified toy commercial. And the toys were pretty cheaply made. They all use the same mold, which is why everybody is a roided out super beast. They all look exactly the same. And Prince Adam and He-Man, exactly the same. They are both roided out, Superman Clark Kent thing, except it's even worse because he looks exactly the same. He has less clothing. He has like a BDSM outfit now, more or less, as He-Man. Like, who would ever buy that? Anyway, so this one subverts expectations. things don't go the way you would expect. And here, major spoilers. Big, huge spoiler alert right here. Skeletor actually wins for once, which I thought was frickin' awesome. Again, he was always the most interesting character anyway. And to think of it, after all these attempts, Skeletor trying again and again and again, and the heroes, of course, being heroes, they have the Batman problem. They will never actually kill him. They will never get rid of him. They will only ever just drive him back, and he keeps doing the same thing. So he has a lot of time to improve his schemes. Shouldn't it be only a matter of time until he actually achieves something, gets somewhere? And so, of course, some people hated the fact that he kills He-Man. Some people say twice. We don't know that.
In fact, Skeletor doesn't kill him at all. The first time when He-Man actually dies, it's because he chooses to sacrifice himself to save the world.
If I don't do this, everybody dies.
He gives his life to stop Skeletor, which is also why I absolutely don't agree that the show disrespects He-Man in any way. And also it serves a purpose for the storytelling. It's a way to up the stakes, because He-Man is the most powerful being in that world. He was a failsafe, the guarantee that nothing really bad ever happens. So by removing him, at least for a while, you increase the stakes, you introduce uncertainty. Whether you like or hate that, it is original and it freshens things up.
At the end, we don't know that. He ran him through the stomach, which is something that heroes always survive. Always. I'm pretty sure he's going to be fine. He's still alive at the end of season 1. And I'm pretty sure he'll stay that way. All right, major spoiler over. Another thing I really liked was, well, generally the character writing was overall a lot better. Like, not necessarily across the board. Again, not everything was perfect. But, for example, Orko's not super annoying this time around. Because in the original, he was just annoying. He was just a bad kind of comedic relief, which it really didn't need because it was all comedy, basically. He's insecure and bumbly and nerdy, obviously. That's still all the case. He still, messes up with magic all the time. And so it's still true to his character, but he's not like so annoying that you just never want to see him. At least that was my thing. Again, just personal opinion. Man-at-Arms, awesome in this. I really like the way they portrayed him. Again, also a lot more depth. Of course, the elephant in the room, so to speak, is Teela. She caused a lot of nerd rage.
In all fairness, I do have mixed feelings about her design. They tried a little too hard to make her badass. She's like the edgelord's version. I do like that she actually looks like a fighter now. There's still the sex dimorphism. She's much smaller than the guys, of course. And speaking of size, He-Man is even bigger. In the original, he had an extremely hard but possible to obtain Schwarzenegger-like bodybuilder physique. Now he's straight up impossibly gargantuan. And even though he's even more physically imposing now, his strength of character is emphasized to show that he's more than just his powers, more than just the sword. She has a trained fighter's physique, so it's actually believable to see her in combat. And she definitely seems more competent than, well, this. Evelyn, on the other hand, why on Earth, why on Eternia is she all yoked? There's really no reason for a sorceress to be this muscular. That's a strange choice right there. While I don't have a problem with that hairstyle in general, it does seem a little too try-hard. And also the outfit change stands out so much because every other character is extremely close to the original.
I really wish people could just watch something for 5 minutes without freaking out about gender. It doesn't really matter that much. Like, I care about the character. Is this a good, compelling character? Yes or no? Let me just put it that way. You can criticize the lack of He-Man in this without stirring up gender drama. It's possible, believe it or not. You can do that. When you're remaking something, basically you lose by default, no matter what. If you redo the original exactly, like if you stick 100% to the formula and the spirit and everything, just make the same thing, people will complain that, oh, it's so original, it's just the same thing repackaged. If you change something, they're going to be like, oh, they changed the thing, I can't believe my childhood is ruined. You know, it's like, you can't win. I don't even know why people try to do remakes. I mean, the cynical answer is because they want to cash in on nostalgia. Overall, the characters I did like. Oh, another big one. Scareglow. Holy shit. Scareglow is badass in this. Definitely like that one, and he should appear more, in my opinion. What about Skeletor? His redesign, you know, the face looks kind of a little bit more gnarly, or whatever, edgy, however you want to put it. Looks more badass. The voice, you know, Mark Hamill is a great voice actor, no doubt about it. But the entire time I was thinking, like, part of my brain was like, why does Skeletor sound like the Joker? It's not right. You know, I'm not saying he did a bad job. I think I would have picked someone else. He needed to be more nasal, you know? So overall, as far as Revelations is concerned, I approached it with, I guess, cautious optimism. Like, I didn't dare expect too much, because, you know, whenever anyone remakes anything, there's a good chance they either mess it up or you just don't like it because it doesn't match your nostalgic memories. It's actually pretty good, I would say. What really surprised me was the She-Ra reboot. The first time we tried watching it, we only made it through a few episodes because it just seemed too much geared toward a young audience, you know, young girls in particular. So it just seemed like the writing would be a little bit too shallow and everything, nothing too exciting going on, not mature enough, which of course the original She-Ra wasn't either. The original She-Ra was also aimed at a young audience and at girls in particular, because it was basically their response when they noticed, wait, girls are interested in this stuff too? Well, damn, we better come up with a female He-Man. That's literally how She-Ra back then started. A while later, we revisited it, gave it another go, because didn't really find anything else interesting to watch at the time, and just stuck with it, and it kept getting better and better. You can tell they must have noticed throughout that there was a significant portion of adult viewers who were interested in it, and you can tell that they ramped up the writing over time. They made it more complex, more mature, developed the characters better. Again, it still works for a young audience, of course, and the characters are all younger than they were in the original, which is why I find it super bizarre to talk about Adora not having gigantic knockers and cleavage. This is a kid's show, dude. It's not something for you to jerk off to. What I said about the He-Man reboot applies here even more, because they went into a lot more depth with the characters here. First off, they individualized the characters much more. Again, the issue of all the toys were the same mold, so they all look the same. Now the princesses look significantly different, and they all have their own personalities and their quirks and their strengths and weaknesses, etc., which makes it a lot more interesting, for sure. Good example, Catra now having actual cat attributes instead of just being a poser with a mask.
The thing is, even though I'm not a fan of this sort of kiddified art style, the character design in and of itself is so much better. Original Catra was just basically a generic 80s fashion model. I mean, sure, the original is more attractive and also mature enough. The new version would be kind of jailbait. And while I certainly appreciate attractive female characters and some titillation, I don't expect it from a show aimed mainly at young girls. In fact, I'd find that pretty weird. But the original design is just comparatively bland, you know?
In a fantasy world where human beast hybrids and other magical creatures exist, why not? Also, again, she's a lot more interesting with her character arc and her inner conflicts, and I think they did a fantastic job with her arc from villain to anti-hero and then eventually hero. And that's something that I wasn't ready to buy at first, because for quite a while they make Catra absolutely despicable, like a really, really strongly hateable character who you think is irredeemable at some point, but then they manage to pull it off to redeem her in a believable way. Same thing with Hordak. In the original, Hordak is just basically stereotypical, I am evil, I will do evil things, and ha ha ha. No redeeming qualities in any way. This time around, Hordak actually has his personal motivation for doing what he does, a very desperate motivation, and it works. It works quite well. The way one villain is kind of replaced by another or superseded or whatever you want to call it works really well. And then you do end up with a villain who is absolutely irredeemable, as far as we can tell, who's just despicable. So there's still that, but there are lots of twists in there, lots of things that you don't see coming, just so much work on the characters. Arguably, the action may fall a little bit behind sometimes. You know, a lot of action movies are just action here, characters, nothing basically. And then you have, you know, like the chick flicks, for lack of a better term, where it's all about just characters and there's not that much happening. It's reasonably balanced, but it's a little bit heavier on character development and everything. And like a lot of guys, I can get pretty bored with all the blah blah and nothing but character interaction and this and that and personal drama and whatever, unless it's really well done, which it is in this case. It's so well done that not only do I not mind it, I actually enjoyed it. Also, in ways that are quite relevant, you know, particularly in pandemic times. You know, like for example, if you think of like a classic action movie, usually there isn't really even much focus on inner conflict beyond the most basic, primitive, I want revenge and stuff like that. I am angry or I must protect, you know. Beyond that, there often isn't that much. And when that's the case, they tend to not tackle things like, you know, chronic stress, PTSD, imposter syndrome, all the things that people in demanding high stress situations that have a lot of responsibility placed on them have to deal with. And the way it's done in She-Ra is where she has actually supportive friends and like emotionally supportive. If you imagine like a male hero with a male friend, if they talked about being uncertain, like what to do, or they don't know if they can do it or whatever, what's the response from the male friend? Don't be a pussy, get it together. You're the hero, figure it out, you know? Not very helpful. Not very helpful at all. Whereas here, their response is basically, hey, I'm your friend, I'm here for you, you may not believe in yourself, but I do. Which is a very strong, positive message. Speaking of strength, this is literally part of the intro. They don't come crying to their friends and play the victim role. It's all about there's adversity, you need to grow to, you know, meet that challenge. You will have support on the way, but you still need to be strong, both physically and in terms of powers, you know, magic powers, and also mentally. Like they need to be smart enough to not continuously fall for the same trap. They need to learn from their mistakes, and they need to be emotionally strong to deal with the, you know, the responsibility and the stress and the loss and all of that. And I said highly relevant, especially when people feel isolated and don't really know how to deal with things. And, you know, us dudes aren't even taught to, how to. As someone born in 82, I got a lot of that upbringing of, you know, you're not supposed to show any emotions, you know, except maybe anger. That's okay. You can get pissed off because that's manly, you know, but you're not supposed to seek help. You're supposed to do everything by yourself. You're not supposed to show emotion. You're not supposed to deal with your emotions. You just got to bottle it all up, and that's how you get high levels of depression and suicide rates and all of that. So yeah, that's nice to see. I think there were more things that I wanted to talk about. There was plenty I liked.
Yes, the other thing is the complexity in storytelling and moral ambiguity. Although there's definitely something enjoyable about immersing yourself in a world that's simpler, where the good and the bad people are easily recognizable. You know what you're dealing with, and you know that despite adversity, the good people are going to win in the end. You can stick to that formula and still add more layers, which is what they did here. The heroes are still genuinely good people who make mistakes, but honest mistakes. The villains are easily recognizable, and some are really just that, villains. But there are also people who can change, or people who are kind of stuck. Horde soldiers. They aren't with the Horde because they are evil. They're with the Horde because they were brought up there and they were indoctrinated into the ideology. And of course, they're also stuck in a hierarchical system where they're supposed to shut up and obey. And then there is Entrapta, who seems to be all over the place, and some people have called her chaotic neutral because of the way her interest in tech seems to override everything else. But in later seasons, you can tell that she does actually have a moral compass, which shows whenever she stops to think about the moral implications of the situation, which a lot of the time she doesn't because she's swept away in her ADHD-like hyper-focus on the things she's passionate about. And also with the way she's oblivious of social norms and conventions. Gradually revealing layers in a character is what makes a show interesting, and that's something that often falls by the wayside in plenty of movies and TV shows.
Before just going rambling, let's leave it at that. Let me know what you liked about it, if you liked it. Anyway, yeah, that shall be it. So thanks for listening. Hope you found it something entertaining, infuriating, I don't know, engaging in some kind of way. Yeah, have a good one, folks.